We have been exploring the Vitakasantana Sutta, the Sutta of the relaxation of thoughts. And this is a series of teachings designed to help us work with difficult, distracting thoughts. It was written specifically for meditation, for use during meditation, but it can easily be applied. Any moment that we find ourselves grasping to challenging thoughts, activating thoughts, intrusive thoughts, thoughts that essentially lead to some form of suffering. It is easier, to see these thoughts as we have been reviewing thoughts of clinging, thoughts of aversion, and thoughts of ignorance. It will be easier to see them during Zazen, when our minds are quieter, of course, and clearer. But then we can take these tools and apply them whenever it is that we need them, which is really all the time, because we get caught in our thoughts all the time. And it is important to stress that these tools are active. They do require us to do something. Because one of the most common misconceptions about meditation, it's that it's about emptying the mind, that it's about not thinking. And I'll make a distinction. Actually, let's just leave it there. That it's about emptying the mind of thoughts. And actually, I think even experienced practitioners can think this in some way for quite some time. I have in the past said that there was a moment in which I realized that my thoughts were not a problem, that they were not something that I needed to get rid of, certainly, and that they were not a problem to be solved. They were not interrupting the silence that I enjoyed very much in my meditation, in my Zazen. They were not obscuring anything. And so it was really my relationship to them that made things cloudy. Because as we know, thoughts are the object of thinking, our sixth sense, according to Buddhism, just as sound is the object of hearing. Thinking is what the mind does. It is what it's built for. But there is a different way of perceiving, of cognizing, the sutras say, of seeing, of hearing, of touching, of smelling, tasting. So suffering appears, stress appears, anxiety and trouble appear when the relationship to our thoughts is problematic. When we believe in them, when we turn them into things, when we imbue them with power, with agency, particularly when we don't investigate them. Because then they cause us to act in ways that cause harm. And so we can keep in mind that what this series is all about, these 5 talks on the wholesome signs that the Buddha described with which to work with these thoughts, are exactly that. 5 ways to work with difficult thoughts. Not to ignore them or suppress them, not to wish them away, not pretend they're not there, not to judge them because they're getting in the way of our quiet mind. Because that quiet and that equanimity come very naturally when the mind settles. And our mind settles because that is also what the mind does. It works very nicely. A focused, attentive mind naturally settles and brightens. It illumines what it sees. And a distracted mind actually will settle too, but it just takes a little bit longer. And so with these tools, we're helping it along. We're working with our mind, not against it. And I think, this is important for anyone who meditates to know, but it might be especially important for Zen practitioners, because we do receive actually very little instruction about how to work with more challenging thoughts. At the beginning of our practice, we hear you let go of the thought or you become it. If you can't let it go, if it keeps coming back, then get close and become it. And that's a true instruction. And in one sense, it's all that we need to know. But it's the doing of it that is not always so straightforward. Right? What if I can't let go of the thought? What if it's more attractive than following my breath? Which for quite a while, that's what it seems like. What if no matter how often I let it go, I come back? It comes back, sorry. And then I don't know how to become it. What does that even mean, to become a thought? If I have an angry thought, what does it mean to become anger? What does it mean to close the gap between me and it without getting involved in the story? How do you actually do that? And what happens in our tradition, in our practice, is you learn that with time, with a lot of trial and error. But how wonderful that we do have here a series of tools to help us work with these unskillful signs. And so thoughts that cause me harm, thoughts that cause others harm, we can first switch that thought with another thought. I can warn myself of the danger of holding on to this thought. I can ignore it, which is really to pay it no mind, is what the sutra says. I can take it back, trace it back to its root, or I can cut it, I can chop it at the base before it has a chance to proliferate. And so we covered switch and warn, and today I want to look at ignore. You can think of it also as to forget, but really more accurately is to pay no mind to it, to pay no attention to the thought. Just as a good person with good eyes, not wanting to see forms that had come into range, would close their eyes or look away. In the same way, if unskillful thoughts still arise, while the person is studying the drawbacks of those thoughts and warning themselves about them, they should pay no mind and pay no attention to those thoughts. And this is really like the instruction to lower your gaze during sesshin, during our silent retreat, to be able to stay focused and alert, particularly during meditation and during a week-long retreat or longer. You're asked to not look around, right? To not read, to not feed your mind images other than the necessary ones to move through your day. Not because there's anything wrong with looking, obviously, but because we're trying to limit what we take in so that we can really see what happens as we perceive. And so this instruction to ignore the thought is like that. It's not suppression, it's not avoidance, it is selective attention. A form of appropriate attention, which I spoke about recently, yoniso manasikara. Because inappropriate attention, the Buddha says, causes us to get chewed by our thoughts. I like that expression. The image is turned on its head. So instead of me nourishing myself with what I see, what I take in, I get chewed up by it. And so what this is saying is that our unexamined thoughts are not innocuous. If they were, there'd be no need to train the mind. And so in that previous sign, we were warning ourselves about the danger of feeding distracting or unskillful, harmful thoughts, because they do proliferate like mushrooms and they take over the mind. It's like that passage in The Little Prince. It's the image that came to my mind as I wrote that. Like that passage in The Little Prince where he's telling the narrator, you know, you really have to be careful and meticulous. You have to pick out all the weeds, because otherwise they just grow into these huge baobabs and they take over your little planet. And the illustration in that section, in that chapter, is the little prince standing on his little planet in 3 huge baobabs that have completely overtaken it. Just the roots alone just cover the entire planet. That's our mind. That's our mind, overtaken by thoughts when they grow out of control. I wrote recently that skeptical doubt, vichikicha, is like mold growing behind your wall. If you don't attend to it, before long, your whole house will be rotting. And so we have to attend to it. Because I think we're all clear that if we were to grab a stick and bash someone over the head with it, we'd hurt them. Even more so if we just kept hitting them. What's not so obvious is the harm we're causing ourselves and others with harmful thoughts that we repeat time and time again. The thought, I'm not enough, is actually a form of aversion or self-hatred. Perhaps a slightly milder form of saying, I hate you, to ourselves. We're certainly going to cause harm if we keep repeating it. But we do it all the time. And so looking at the thought very carefully, switching it if we can. If we can't, warning ourselves of its danger is what helps us to then let it go. And so that switching, remember, you're not getting involved with the content of the thought. You're not wondering why it's there. It is simply you switch the channel. I am perfect and complete, just as I am, for example. But what if you don't believe it? Sometimes people will ask me, you know, what if I'm not convinced of what I'm saying? Say it anyway. Because if you've been watering the seed of self-doubt or self-hatred for years in your mind, for decades, it's going to take a little while for that seed to dry out and for the seed of compassion, of confidence, of wholeness to begin to grow. It's not going to happen in one sitting period or in a day or a week. So you patiently water that seed, the new one, and let the other one dry out. But if that doesn't work, if the thought is persistent enough that switching it doesn't budge it, then you warn yourself about the danger of following it. You study the drawbacks, the sutra says, of keeping that thought going. Being very clear and very honest with yourself. And so you can see that each tool, each method requires progressively more energy, more psychic energy. Because in the first, you're just switching the channel. With the second tool, you have to talk to yourself a bit. I have to get in there and grapple with the thought. I have to see it long enough to recognize this is dangerous. This will harm me or harm someone else. This has consequences. And if that doesn't work, then you go to the next level and you ignore the thought. You remove your attention from it. It's like you cover the watering spout. So you're not watering that bad seed. Just like someone with good eyesight would cover their eyes or turn away so as not to see what they don't want to see. You know, I do this all the time when I'm watching movies nowadays, because they've become so violent. And series, right? They become so violent that I often will just close my eyes and cover my ears during the graphic scenes. I don't want those images in my mind stream, right? They don't help me in any way. They don't offer anything to me. I'm not pretending that violence doesn't exist in our world or in our minds. But I don't want to expose myself gratuitously to it either. And of course it is true that there are thoughts we should not ignore. We shouldn't turn away from. But that's different than the kind of voyeurism the media feasts on. And so we need to know. We need to know when the thought we're having is one we should look at or one we should ignore. And a thought, you know, like I'm not enough, could go either way. There is a place for looking at it directly and asking, what is this? Why is this here? Where did it come from? Am I sure? As Thich Nhat Hanh would say. There is also a time to set this thought aside and just not give it airtime, so that we can go deeper into our own mind. And can you tell? Practice, trial and error. If you're not sure, err on the side of dropping it. Because if it needs you to look at it, it will keep coming back. But not looking at it will give you the space you need to see more. What more? How these thoughts and the thinker are co-creating one another. Because this is even more important. A more important reason to work with difficult thoughts. On one level, they're causing us harm. Thoughts of greed, thoughts of anger, thoughts of ignorance are causing us harm. We can see that. So working with them skillfully will help us. But on a deeper level, or on another level, these thoughts, and really any thought, are doing something much more significant. They're constantly recreating and reinforcing my sense of self, right? My sense of the one who's having these thoughts and liking these thoughts or fighting these thoughts. That's where the real trouble comes from. So working with an angry thought, for example, by replacing it with a thought of loving kindness is like you're putting antibiotic over a wound. Seeing how a thought gives birth to the person who's thinking it, that's like pulling out the splinter that caused the wound in the first place. And so anything that gets in the way of that spaciousness, of that natural, bright, luminous nature of the mind, will just make this harder to see. Once again, it's not that there's anything wrong with thoughts. It's just that they cover the process of me making, I making, mind making. Let's go back for a second to the chain of dependent origination so that we can see how incredibly powerful our thoughts are and why it is so helpful to actually work with them more carefully. If you are new to this teaching of dependent origination, just stay with me. Don't despair. It seems a little complicated. And it is a little complicated, but I'll go slowly so that we can really see what's going on. So we just take a simple, somewhat neutral thought so we don't get too wrapped up in its content. So I'm sitting zazen, I'm following my breath, and an ambulance goes by, and I hear its siren. That's the moment of contact. There is my ear consciousness, which is, really the part of the brain, you could say, that makes sense of the sound, and the sound itself. That wee, 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 wee. Those three things come together. The sound, my ear consciousness, and I perceive siren before I even have a name for it. And that contact happens really in the middle of the chain of dependent origination, which says, when this is, that comes to be. So what needs to be there for me to hear the sound? Right? What comes before contact? Not sequentially, but what needs to be there in order for me to make contact? My senses, right? In this case, my ear and my mind. When the siren is there, if the ear is there and working, and consciousness is working, then there is the sound of a siren. What had to be there before? Now, for the senses to be there, what has to be there? A body and a mind. A body made up of the elements, earth, fire, water, and air, at least according to Buddhism, and a mind that senses that sound and immediately categorizes it, pleasant, unpleasant, or neither pleasant nor unpleasant. It notices its characteristics. It's loud, it's high-pitched. It scans its mental file for other examples of the sound, and then it processes through attention the sound as siren. These are the 5 skandhas: form, sensation, conception, mental formations, and awareness. And those are bundled into the link of name and form. There are 3 other links before that: mental formations, mental formations, and ignorance. But I'm not going to go into those because they pertain to a previous life. But even if we just stay in this moment of contact with the siren, those 5 skandhas are already wrapped into name and form. So simplifying just a little bit, there's a body, there's a mind. There are senses. And those senses make contact. So far, so good? I hope. Now, let's move forward from the chain. I make contact. What happens? There's a feeling, a sensation, really. So it's not an emotion, a sensation. I like this, I don't like this, I don't care. If it sounds repetitive, it is. It is a little repetitive because the chain isn't actually linear. It's like there's these loops and fractals that repeat in it. So there's a moment of contact that happened because of the senses, because I have a body and I have a mind. And now immediately object, that perception falls into one of three categories. I like it, I don't like it, I don't care. Pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. Let's say I don't like it. Immediately, craving comes up. It would be great if I could just hear the sound on its own terms, which is absolutely possible. And we'll get to that. But usually what happens is immediately there is a pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral feeling arising. And then craving comes out of that. I want the sound to go away. Wanting it to go away, boop, clinging pops up. Craving wants, clinging grabs. So craving is, ugh, how awful. Clinging is, why does this always happen when I'm sitting? The street is so noisy, it's such a pain. And there it is, becoming. Then the birth of the self and the suffering that comes from it. Old age, sickness, and death, but really just bundle it into suffering. Which in classical Buddhism conditioned the next life. But just even in that life, in that moment of contact, siren, now there's Zuisei listening to the siren. And I like this or I don't like this. And I'm moving away from it, I'm moving toward it, or I'm moving away from it. And all of this, of course, is happening before we can even acknowledge that it's happening. I mean, I spoke of it sequentially because that's the only way that I can speak of it. But it's actually happening, everything, everywhere, all at once, with that single point of contact. When the contact happens and sensation arises, pleasant, unpleasant, or neither, there's no self there yet. There's just a perception. And this is the sensation that comes from it. But it's the moment in which I crave, I want the pleasant sensation, or I push away the unpleasant one. That then I cling and the self comes into being. It goes from being just sound to me hearing the sound and I don't like it. This is how the self is born again and again and again with every single contact that we make, millions of times a day. Right? The process is immediate with me at the center. Zuisei at the center. So do you remember that movie, Being John Malkovich? There's a scene where he goes into a room and every person there is John Malkovich. It's like that, except it's not just every person. It's every chair, every table, every lamp, every fixture, every flower pot, every glass, cup, and nail, and thread, and breath, and thought, and. Every single thing I see is made in my own image if I'm not paying attention. That is why a thought isn't just a thought. It's a self-making machine. Even good thoughts. It's why they can and do lead to suffering. But they don't have to. It is why we give the instruction when we teach people to do Zazen. Let your body be completely still. You know, and I had this little kind of trick that I would show people, you know, you swallow, you place the tip of your tongue against the roof of your mouth. This creates a vacuum so that you're not even swallowing. There's nothing wrong with swallowing, obviously. But in that moment of contact, boop, Zuisei, there's the self. So ignoring a thought, forgetting a thought, is making space. So we can see how this process happens. So that we can see we have a choice. we can train ourselves to hear a sound just as sound, to see a form just as form, and not immediately relate to it in terms of what it can or can't do for me. Because that's really where the conflict comes from. There's not even a problem with the fact that the self arises with every contact. It has to. So it's interesting to imagine what life would be like in a completely different configuration. I believe that the reason there is so much conflict in the world is because we all want things and people and the world itself to serve us, to please us, to conform to our wishes. I don't want that moment of contact to be unpleasant. I don't. But they can't possibly do that. Not for one person, not for 9 billion. And so what do? To start, we train ourselves to perceive, as the Buddha encouraged Bahiya, in the seen, only what is seen. In the heard, only what is heard. Those of you working on the breath, that is the task. When you count the breath, when you follow the breath, only the breath. And then thoughts will come and will get in the way. Now you have 3 nifty tools with which to let them go and return so that there's only breath. Those of you working on koans, there's only the koan. I don't know how many times have you heard me say, the only way to see it is you have to be it. If it's a cypress tree, there is only the cypress tree. There's no Darla or Elliot or Guy or RJ working on the cypress tree. There is just the cypress tree. But how? Let go of the thought that separates you. It's just a thought. It's not reality. Those of you who do Shikantasa, it's a perfect practice for this. There's the siren, just moves in a sense through the screen of your mind. No need to talk to yourself about it. No need to let it go. No need to focus. It's just the siren. It's just the sound. And the Buddha said, when we are not with the sound, right? There's me and there's the sound. When we are not with the sound, when we are not in the sound, because we also plop ourselves there. It's not just that we are with things, we're right at the center of everything. We place ourselves at the center of everything. But the Buddha says when we are not with the sound and when we're not in the sound, in other words, when the me is not there, then where is it? And where is the pain and the dislike that siren causes me? Or that thing you said? Or the job that I have that I don't like? Or the thought that I keep repeating to myself? And the pain that comes from that, where are they? When you are not in that, then, Bahiya, you will be neither here nor beyond nor in between the two. Which points to what John was saying about the Faith Mind poem. When you are neither here nor there nor in between, just this is the end of suffering. Do you understand?